continue his work as a special counsel, and he asked to be so appointed. Upon considering his request, as well as the extraordinary circumstances relating to this matter, I have concluded that it is in the public interest to appoint him as special counsel. This appointment confirms my commitment to provide Mr. Weiss all the resources he requests. It also reaffirms that Mr. Weiss has the authority he needs to conduct a thorough investigation and to continue to take the steps he deems appropriate independently, based only on the facts and the law. Mr. Weiss will also continue to serve as U.S. Attorney for the District of Delaware. As special counsel, he will continue to have the authority and responsibility that he has previously exercised to oversee the investigation and decide where, when, and whether to file charges. The special counsel will not be subject to the day-to-day supervision of any official of the department, but he must comply with the regulations, procedures, and policies of the department. Consistent with the special counsel regulations, at the conclusion of Mr. Weiss's work, he will provide me with a report explaining the prosecution or declination decisions reached by him. As with each special counsel who has served since I have taken office, I am committed to making as much of his report public as possible, consistent with legal requirements and department policy. Today's announcement affords the prosecutors, agents, and analysts working on this matter the ability to proceed with their work expeditiously and to make decisions indisputably guided only by the facts and the law. The men and women undertaking this investigation are public servants who have dedicated their careers to protecting the citizens of this country. The appointment of Mr. Weiss reinforces for the American people the department's commitment to both independence and accountability in particularly sensitive matters. I am confident that Mr. Weiss will carry out his responsibility in an even-handed and urgent manner and in accordance with the highest traditions of this department. Thank you.
If U.S. Attorney Weiss had the authorities he needed,
you just heard some extraordinary remarks there from the Attorney General Merrick Garland, who walked off without taking those shouted reporter questions there, and there are many of them. What he just announced is going to have both tremendous legal and political implications. He just said that on Tuesday of this week, the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, his name is David Weiss, who was appointed by former President Trump and has continued in that role, did come to the Justice Department and asked the Attorney General for a special status, special counsel status. That legal status would allow for him to continue his ongoing investigations that include the already known part of the probe that has to do with Hunter Biden, President Biden's son. It may go beyond what we already know had been discussed with that same U.S. attorney, who was the U.S. attorney who handled that plea deal, which, if you recall, back in July, was entered and then fell apart. Well, now that U.S. attorney has come to Merrick Garland and asked to be given some level of independence from the department as special counsel. This raises a lot of questions, and we want to go right now to Weijia Jiang, our senior White House correspondent, who is standing on the North Lawn there. Weijia, I know neither of us are lawyers, but in terms of the politics of this, the White House has insisted throughout that they are not touching the Justice Department here and not having any influence over the Attorney General. Now this announcement really gives that special status to the Attorney General's claims by making David Weiss a special counsel. What do we know about whether this is the first time the White House has heard of the decision?
Well, so far, the White House has not offered any comment about this remarkable announcement, but it is really important to understand how we got here. It was just over 2 weeks ago that that plea deal that you mentioned with Hunter Biden fell apart in a very dramatic fashion inside the courtroom. Hunter Biden thought that he was going to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax fraud charges. He thought that there was going to be a separate diversion case for a gun charge, and that all fell apart and raised a lot of questions about whether this independence that we are now talking about existed. And so that is what we are doing here today, talking about this special counsel. But you are right that it is very likely that the White House will say nothing and say that they are absolutely independent of the DOJ. The president has said before the same thing, that he supports all the work that Attorney General Garland is doing, and that, he will not be commenting. One thing he has said, though, Margaret, with regard to his son Hunter Biden, is that he's very proud of his son. He said that after we first found out about the plea deal. He said that through the White House after that plea deal fell apart. And so we expect to hear more of the same. But one thing that's really important that has changed since then is what we have also been hearing out of Capitol Hill, right? There are also oversight investigations going on. One of Hunter Biden's former business partners has come out and testified that President Biden, while he was vice president, was actually on various phone calls in which Hunter Biden was dealing business overseas. And so that raises so many more questions, Margaret, about what the president knew, when he knew it, and whether he was involved, which of course he himself has always said he has known nothing about those business dealings and was certainly never involved. But I think today you're seeing a commitment, as Garland just pointed out, to getting to the bottom of all those questions.
That's right. And there are things that can be, as the former Attorney General Bill Barr said on Face the Nation last Sunday, things can be shameful without being illegal. So those political questions in Congress, that is separate from what we just heard today from the Attorney General specific to this case involving that federal investigation that has been ongoing through the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware for 5 years, an extraordinarily long period of time, ultimately leading us to, as you just laid out there, Weija, that July plea deal that very dramatically fell apart. And I know that in that courtroom that day was CBS's Catherine Herridge, who is with us now, I understand, from the Justice Department and has been speaking to sources there. Catherine, this is a tremendous turn of events. What have you learned about how this will work?
Well, Margaret, good to be with you. It is an extraordinary turn of events when you consider the timeline. As you mentioned, just a few weeks ago, at the end of July, there was an effort by both the prosecutors and Hunter Biden's defense team to wrap up this years-long case with a bow until that plea agreement collapsed. The judge deferred a decision on whether to accept or reject it. And what we learned at that news conference just a few minutes ago from the Attorney General is that earlier this week on Tuesday, the U.S. Attorney David Weiss, who's been leading this investigation, approached him and said that he felt the investigation had reached a stage that he needed to continue his work with special counsel status. So what does that mean in the short term? What it means is that Weiss will ultimately deliver a report to the nation about his decision-making in the Hunter Biden case, whether he chooses to bring charges or he declines to bring charges, and that would involve congressional testimony. A former federal prosecutor I spoke to just before this event said to me the appointment of a special counsel would have the effect of delaying a resolution on the Hunter Biden matter, in his opinion. And it would certainly delay any anticipated testimony from the U.S. Attorney in Delaware to Republicans on Capitol Hill who have been seeking that testimony for several months. So it's an extraordinary development considering where the two parties were 2 weeks ago to wrap up this years-long case, now to the appointment of a special counsel that will have these broad authorities, most importantly, to continue this ongoing investigation, Margaret.
Catherine, and it really is interesting, given that it was June 7th, the U.S. Attorney said he had ultimate authority, and then again had said to Congress that he felt he had that, and now this Tuesday says, I need some independence to go further into this investigation. And as we just heard from the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, the investigation is ongoing. we will have more coverage of these legal issues as well as the political impact, because as Catherine just laid out, the timeline for this seems to be dragging on. And as of today, we are 451 days away from a presidential election. And this extraordinary news about the president's son and how the Biden federal government will continue its investigation into him. I want to leave you with this special report on that note and tell you to please stay tuned to CBS News, your local news, and of course, the CBS Evening News tonight for further coverage. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Margaret Brennan. Thank you all for watching.
Well, we have been watching a CBS News special report regarding the Hunter Biden investigation. Some major news being made on that today. The Attorney General has appointed a special counsel in the case, David Weiss.
Merrick Garland said Weiss had asked to be appointed as special counsel on Tuesday, and Garland said he concluded it was in the public interest after considering the request. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joins us now. Jessica, why make David Weiss a special counsel in this case? And what do these developments suggest to you about either the legal and or political circumstances surrounding this case?
Well, I think the legal and the political is all wrapped up here, because elevating David Weiss essentially from the attorney overseeing this case to the special counsel overseeing this case means you're saying to the world, he gets even more independence. And I noted 2 times where Merrick Garland said basically the same thing, which is David Weiss is going to determine the when, the whether, and the what of whether or not there are more charges brought against Hunter Biden. It also signals that this investigation absolutely is ongoing. I don't think that at this point, particularly considering that there is a plea deal on the table and a judge is determining whether or not to basically bless that plea deal, I don't think you move David Weiss into the special counsel category unless there might be something else, unless there is something that could come in the future, which again is somewhat extraordinary given that this investigation has been going on for half a decade. One other thing I would note is the fact that this does signal to us that the investigation is ongoing is really interesting, given the difference you saw in court between Hunter Biden's team saying, this is the end of the investigation, right? And the Department of Justice saying, no, it's not. And that was really the moment when those plea negotiations fell apart. And this is another signal that the Department of Justice was not bluffing, that in fact, they are still looking into other activities.
So, Jessica, it seems really unusual to me that Weiss was appointed the special counsel. I was looking up special counsels, and it said they are appointed when it is best to have someone outside of the government come in because of a conflict of interest. And 3 things stood out to me. 1, Weiss was previously overseeing this investigation. 2, Garland said that he asked for the job. And 3, he's continuing to serve as U.S. Attorney for Delaware. So by definition, is not outside of the government. Is this completely outside of the box? And if so, what does that mean in terms of Merrick Garland's decision to appoint David Weiss as the special counsel in this case?
Great question. Well, I'll say everything about this is out of the box. And that's something we say with respect to former President Trump and the fact that there's a special counsel, obviously, as we all know, looking into his activities. There is a special counsel looking into the current president with respect to the classified documents that he found at his residences. And now there is a 3rd appointment of a special counsel now looking into the current president's son. So to a certain extent, all of this is somewhat out of the box. I mean, politically, I think what Merrick Garland is trying to do is emphasize something that he's been saying from the beginning, which is this is a U.S. attorney who was nominated by former President Trump. This is not somebody who President Biden picked to oversee his son's case. And it really puts more meat on the bones of the claim that when Merrick Garland says, I am not the one calling the shots in this investigation. I was appointed by President Biden. I am not the one directly overseeing the investigation into his son, it creates much more structure and much more support to that claim. The special counsel in this case, I mean, it really means, of course, yes, as you noted, he is still a government appointee. He is still overseeing Delaware, but it moves him with respect to this investigation kind of outside of the typical day-to-day reporting up to Merrick Garland. It moves him kind of somewhat outside of the typical organizational chart. Now, will this calm critics who say that the Attorney General is going after Hunter Biden in a way that he would not go after other people? No. Will this calm critics on the other side? Probably not, but that's a political reality.
All right, let's bring in CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge. Catherine, you were in the room for the announcement. Give us some context. What led to this point? Why is this happening now?
Well, what we know from the Justice Department and the Attorney General is that it's happening now because it came at the request of the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, David Weiss, who's been leading the Hunter Biden investigation since 2018, that he needs these additional authorities as the investigation continues. But you're right to point out that this decision did not happen in a vacuum. You need to see several data points here to understand, I think, what the pressure was to elevate this case. First and foremost, we have the failure of that plea agreement just about 2 or 3 weeks ago in Delaware, where both sides were ready to wrap this thing up with a bow, only to learn that the judge felt she couldn't accept or reject the plea agreement because of what she described as non-standard terms in that agreement. You recall it was for 2 misdemeanor tax charges and 1 felony gun offense. Also, what's happened in recent weeks has been this very public testimony of these IRS whistleblowers on Capitol Hill about what they say they witnessed during the course of David Weiss's investigation. To sum it up, they allege that there was preferential treatment for the president's son and that the evidence supported much more serious felony tax charges, including tax evasion. And finally, it's a question of the precedent. The calls for a special counsel have been lingering for years in this particular case. But now David Weiss has felt that the ongoing investigation needs that kind of elevation and protection. And I know you both know that it was this element of an ongoing investigation that led to the unraveling of that plea agreement in Delaware. Hunter Biden's attorneys felt that this deal was the end of the story, no more litigation for Hunter Biden and his business deals. But the federal prosecutor said that's not the case, not so fast. We have a number of ongoing issues that we are considering.
Clearly not the end of the story. All right, thanks, Catherine. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian also here with us now. Nicole, we have a special counsel in 2 Trump investigations. Now there's one on the Biden case. How could all of this play out on the campaign trail?
Well, it's also to the point that Catherine referenced, more specifically how it plays out on Capitol Hill, which is really where I think we'll see more of the immediate reaction and response here, because many congressional Republicans have actually been pushing for David Weiss to have this special counsel status for some time now. So whether or not this quiets some of the concerns that they have, I think remains to be seen. But, you know, congressional Republicans have even suggested a potential impeachment inquiry, not only against the Attorney General, but also even President Biden. You know, this has been a talking point that some congressional Republicans have made in part because of their dissatisfaction with how they believe this investigation has been handled. So again, whether or not this appointment now of David Weiss as a special counsel allays some of their concerns until we see more of this investigative process play out remains to be seen. But just to convey how seriously some Republicans have been pushing this. I mean, just today you had Florida Congressman Greg Steube, who filed articles of impeachment against President Biden based on some of these allegations against Hunter Biden. Now, it's worth noting that you also have representatives like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who did something similar earlier this spring over the Biden administration's border policies. And, again, unclear if these types of resolutions will move forward. But certainly Republicans have been very adamant in their view about trying to hold the former president, or the current president, and his administration hold their feet to the fire, again, over the way this Hunter Biden investigation has been handled. And has been previously noted, there are a range of investigations into this right now, more specifically with the House Oversight Committee, which has really kind of been the oversight committee and the umbrella committee that has been handling a lot of these allegations, which just put out a report this week with new bank records from what they say are transactions involving the Biden family. The chairman just this week saying that ultimately he would like to subpoena members of the Biden family. So again, this is only likely to have more political implications, again, more specifically on Capitol Hill, but certainly possibly on the campaign trail as well.
All right, we'll wait to see what the reaction is from House Republicans to this news. Nicole Killian, Jessica Levinson, and Catherine Herridge, thank you all.
The headline there, Merrick Garland has appointed David Weiss, the U.S. attorney for the District of Delaware, as a special counsel into all the investigations into the president's son, Hunter Biden. We're going to continue to monitor this story and bring you all the updates as they happen. For now, a quick break. You're streaming CBS News.
An original documentary from CBS reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much. God bless you and God bless